And at the same time, we at President Lincoln's Cottage have shifted our work from the cottage to our individual homes. And we recognize that any programming we offered would depend on your willingness to invite us into these spaces where you are able to be your most vulnerable and authentic selves. And this got us thinking a lot about Lincoln's time at the cottage, how he used this place and how he was able to be in this space. One thing that kept coming up for us was Lincoln's vulnerability, or his empathy and his compassion, all in the face of national crisis. And it felt like there was something worth exploring there. As luck would have it, I recently met our presenter for today, Laura Banks, when she signed on to be one of our presenters for the now postponed Lincoln Ideas Forum, where she will at some future date talk about the importance of compassion as a leadership characteristic. After a couple of conversations with Laura, it really felt like the time was right to offer this program on common humanity. Laura Banks is a certified compassion cultivation training instructor and is dual certified by Stanford University Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. Her evidence-based training and personal experience shape her commitment to strengthening her own and others' capacity to thrive and find meaning throughout life, especially through the cultivation of compassion. And Laura, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kelly. I am delighted to be here, and just seeing the few faces I can across the top of my screen is completely warming my heart. Thank you for joining me. When Kelly, we were speaking briefly before joining this call, she mentioned drawing the connection between Lincoln's Cottage as his home, where he would often invite people to have conversations during the Civil War, and where he would retreat to think and to write and to resource so that he could step back into the hard world that he was living in. You know, so that was the space that the cottage was, and that in a way that while we're sitting in Zoom, that we really are in a very literal way recreating that intimacy by being in our own personal spaces, but joining around this conversation about common humanity. Anyway, I am delighted to be here. I'm so honored. Thank you, Callie, for making this possible, and to Joan and Michelle and everyone else at the President Lincoln's Cottage, and to each of you for taking time in your day to join me. So I want to just start by just acknowledging that this is really hard, what we're all doing right now. None of us have done, no matter what we've seen in our lives, whether we've faced terminal illness, whether we've had people we love pass away, whether we are coming from countries that have seen war, whether we've known poverty before or not. This particular constellation of historical, of moments coming together in terms of illness and financial crisis and uncertainty is really unprecedented. And whatever strengths we're bringing to it, it's requiring us to really draw into our deepest resources to step into this moment with as much love and compassion and presence for ourselves and the people we care about, and complete strangers than we've probably ever had to do before. And so, as Callie mentioned, when we were having when we've had conversations over the last few weeks, this idea of common humanity, of interconnectedness, of the interconnectedness that we have as human beings on this planet Earth is really in our face right now. You know, wherever we go, we're very keenly aware that we don't want other people to get sick because of us. We don't want to get sick. We don't want the people we love. We don't even want strangers. Our decision to shelter in place, which for many of us began almost a month ago, wasn't first because we were concerned about ourselves. It was because we were concerned about strangers and health workers and elderly in our communities. And as we've gone on to through this process, we've realized that the consequences could be, that there could be consequences, or that there are consequences for us that we couldn't have even imagined a month ago. But we chose to do this because we care. And that capacity to both be in the presence of suffering and the presence of the unknown, of difficulty, but to also connect into our sense of care and our wish for things to be different and better and to do what we can, that is by definition what compassion is. It's to hold both the difficulty and our sense of concern and connection, concern for ourselves, for our loved ones, for strangers, and for people we will never, ever even get to meet. So I want to start with just a funny, quick little story that came up this morning. And I don't know, it made me happy. And I think humor is a great way for us to connect as human beings. In fact, there's a lot of really interesting science behind that. Shared laughter is one of the quickest ways to become friends with someone, to care about someone, and to find commonality, to find our common humanity. And so humor is a really, really important part of common humanity. This morning, my husband was working in the other room and he was having a conversation with a colleague. And in the middle of his conversation, he just burst out in sort of belly shaking laughter, which usually when you're having a work conversation is not a typical response to what you're doing. And so after we got off the call, I said, what was that all about? And he shared how his colleague is the mother of two young children, a 5 and an 8-year-old. And that she, like many of you or many people, are trying to juggle full-time career, homeschooling children, being with kids all the time, often in small spaces without regular access to the outdoors, trying to navigate that with a partner who often is also working full-time. And our children have all grown. They're 19, 22, and 24. So we're not doing that particular flavor of COVID-19. But when she shared the story, I just burst out laughing because this is like my husband. It resonated so true. So this morning she went into her son's room and they were going to change his bedding and probably do some cleaning. And when she walked inside, this is what she saw. So I'm going to share my screen with you really briefly. But I'm not, Joan, I can't see how to share my screen right now. Let's see. Oh, here we go. I found it. Got it. Thank you. Sorry about the interruption. Okay, so this is what she saw when she walked in. A declaration of independence. Do not help mommy at all. So I don't know if any of you who've had children have had moments where your children are just done. No more, no muss. And they put that declaration, all 3 of our boys at some point had on their bedroom door a sign that said something to that extent when they were just done. Too much. I want space. I don't want to do this anymore. And when I saw that, I just felt my heart totally extend and resonate with this mom who's trying to juggle it all, with the 8-year-old who's just tired of being home and having his routine disrupted, and with all of us who probably wish we could just put that on our lives. No more. I'm done helping. I just want to go back to normal. And so I think that moment of seeing ourselves and other people and seeing other people in ourselves really is what is going to help us get through. One of the key things that will help us get through this unknown is seeing that and having compassion toward that, seeing the humor in it, recognizing ourselves, and just being able to share that experience. So as Kelly mentioned, I teach compassion. And some people are like, well, how do you teach compassion? And one of the things that is really cool that we have learned in the last 10, 15 years, thanks to modern technologies and neuroscience, is that compassion is both a trait. It's something that we're born with as human beings, that we're wired with, but it's also a skill that we can train. So it's also like a muscle. It's a skill that we learn the same way we learn how to walk, by watching people do it. And the way we learn how to talk as human beings, as children. So we learn by seeing it, but even more deeply, it's in us. We have that capacity. And because we have that capacity, and now that we understand better that we can train it, scientists and researchers and psychologists have started sort of pulling some of the threads of like, well, what are the themes? What are things people can be doing? And one of the really central themes to compassion is this idea of common humanity, that the people in the world around us and all other beings are just like me. They want to be happy, they want to thrive, they want to flourish, and they want to be free from suffering and free from the things that make life hard and that cause pain and that cause sorrow. Every single creature, those two things, we hold them. And when we can see that in ourselves, and we can see that in our loved ones and in other people, that sense of commonality really begins to shore up and support us, particularly in difficult times. Margaret Mead, I will read a quote by her, which I think is really brilliant. The anthropologist Margaret Mead was once asked by a student what she considered to be the first sign of civilization in a culture. The student expected Mead to talk about fish hooks or clay pots or grinding stones or literature, or language, right? But no, Mead said, that the first sign of civilization in ancient culture was a femur, which is our big thigh bone, that had broken and then healed. Mead explained that in the animal kingdom, if you break a leg, you die. You cannot run from danger, get to the river to drink, or hunt for food. You are simply meat for prowling beasts. No animal survives a broken leg long enough for the bone to heal. A broken femur that has healed is evidence that someone has taken time to stay with the one who fell, has bound up the wound, has carried the person to safety, and has tended the person through recovery. Helping someone else through difficulty is where civilization starts, Mead said. So I want to just share a couple of quick thoughts, and then about there are two threads in common humanity that we're going to explore today. And I'm going to explain each of these two threads in just a moment, and there'll be an activity associated with each of the different, with these two threads. And you're welcome to participate. You're welcome to also just sort of bow out.
You're going
to take some time to just think. But I'll introduce those two threads and we'll do an exercise around each one of them. And then we'll have a chance to have some questions and answers at the end, at a Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions that you come up during this workshop, feel free to put them in the chat, and Joan will be sort of monitoring those, and we'll come back to them at the end. And if for some reason we've missed it, you can also raise your hand, your virtual hand, in the participants window. If you click on that, and we'll try to get to you. You can also send your questions by email to the info email at Lincoln's Cottage, and I'd be happy to respond after this workshop. So the two threads that I want to pull out is first, this idea of our interconnectedness, that we all depend on each other. We all depend on multiple people and beings and creatures and aspects of life and of history to support us in this present moment, but also over the course of our lives. And that interconnectedness, by bringing our awareness to it and recognizing it and reflecting on it, we, in this moment of social distancing, where there's a real sense of isolation, we actually begin to recognize, oh no, my life is intertwined with many other lives. And I'm dependent on many other people and for the goods in my life, for the goodness of my life, but also that my goodness has implications and spreads out into the world in ways I'll never know. And so that's the first thread. The second thread is that, so we have this, so going back, the first one is sort of cultivating this appreciation for other people, and gratitude can be a real buffer against stress and difficulty. And the second one is to really look at the sameness, that just like me, this person in front of me, the stranger I'll never meet on the other side of the planet, wants to be happy. They want the people they love to be happy. They want to thrive, they want to flourish, and they want to be free from suffering. And that similarity is true for everyone I ever meet. And even if I don't know anything about them, I can recognize that similarity. And there's some pretty powerful neuroscience about the way that recognizing the similarities we have with other people, one, that it creates a sense of warmth and protection, belonging inside of us, but that it also helps us to be like that, the example that Margaret Mead gives of our willingness to stay with someone while they're suffering so that they can heal. Part of me, because I usually teach in live workshops, I want to say any questions. So please, any questions, put them in the chat window. And I would be happy to respond to them. Anyway, I want you to just take a moment. We're going to move on to this idea of our mutual interdependence and interconnectedness. And I'd like you to just take a moment and just wherever you're seated, think about what is making this moment right now possible for you. You might think about the fact that you are sitting at your phone or a computer. And unless you are a computer like hardware developer or builder, you didn't build the computer yourself. And even if you did, it's made up of materials which you did not mine. It's made up of technologies you did not create. If you are tuned into this, it means you have internet. I didn't develop the internet. I didn't even install Verizon Fios in my house. Somebody else came when I first moved into this house and did that for me. You might think about the chair you're sitting on or the lighting in your house, the fact that when you go to turn on your electricity, the light is there. If you ate any food today, if you had breakfast, if you had lunch, how did that food come into your life? Who were the people that grew that food? Who were the people who gathered that food, who harvested it, who prepared it, who shipped it, who transported it, who sold it at grocery stores, who are willing to leave their families to go work at grocery stores so that they are there, or perhaps if you use Instacart, did your shopping for you? Who are the people who manage the global supply chains? Who are the people who keep trade between countries going so that you could have the lemons or the whatever that's out of season that you enjoyed? And like, so we can extend this, like these are just these little tangible things, but then think about all the people in your neighborhood or in your town or your country who are choosing to shelter in place. Think about the doctors and the nurses and the techs and the janitors and the administrators and the insurance company people who are working really, really hard right now to make sure that we have access to healthcare if something happens to us, or to our family, or to our neighbors. What about the EMTs? The people who make sure that the roads are paved, that the lights work, stoplights work. So this capacity to start, just to stop for a moment, and even though we're socially distancing, to recognize that even this minute, right now, right here, only exists because of the goodwill of many, many people of whom we're never going to meet. And this particular workshop only exists because of the imagination of Callie Hawkins and her, and just the people who have funded and make the Lincoln Cottage possible, President Lincoln's Cottage possible. And, and why am I here? Because Thupten Jinpa decided to create a program around training compassion. So we begin this capacity to start seeing how our lives in every moment are supported in ways that we can barely begin to understand is such a powerful practice, particularly in this moment where we feel really isolated, where we can. The other part of that is to recognize that we too have that same role in other people's lives. That if we're choosing to socially distance, we're protecting people we'll never know. If we are continuing to work, or we're taking care of children, or we're taking care of aging parents, taking care of a partner, we're taking care of pets. That the same way that it is true for us, that it can extend to other people. And so I'm going to just give you guys maybe a few minutes. If you have a pen or a paper, you can grab it. If not, you can use your computer, or you can just sit quietly. Maybe for like the next 3 minutes, I'll just be quiet. And I invite you to think about who in the last maybe 24 hours you've interacted and been conscious with, or maybe you didn't even know they were there, but that as you sit and you start thinking about your own life, who are the people who have helped you survive and thrive in this moment? As you're writing, you can also reflect on ways in which the choices you're making right now might be supporting other people. So maybe just taking a few more seconds to jot down any last thoughts. You can always come back to this practice. And in fact, the thing that's really amazing about this practice is that any time you're feeling despairing about the goodness of the world, or you're feeling particularly alone, just stopping and thinking in this moment, how am I supported by countless, in big ways and small ways, by countless other people, including those I consider to be my friends or strangers. How am I being held in this moment right now, being supported? And that if you're ever struggling to feel like, well, you're having a sort of George Bailey, It's a Wonderful Life moment, thinking, oh, my life was worthless. I can promise you, we all could have an It's a Wonderful Life movie made about us. Every single person is a George Bailey. Like every single person, we've supported other people in ways we'll never understand. Our basic goodness is just a fundamental part of who we are. And letting your mind just be aware of this and to take a moment to rest in this awareness of deep appreciation and interconnectedness has such a powerful effect on our bodies physiologically and also on our emotions. So in this time, it's like this resource. It's like being in the desert and realizing you have this spring of water next to you all the time. And all you need to do is take a moment and to like dip your cup in it and to drink it. You're like, okay, I can do this. So that idea of interconnectedness is one of the themes of Common Humanity. And I'm not going to take a lot of time just because this is a short workshop to draw the parallels to Abraham Lincoln's life. But they're there. His awareness of how dependent we were. I mean, that was his whole idea of union and not wanting the country to split, was this idea of how interdependent we were. And anyway, I'm grateful for that. In fact, I'll just read this one quote that I love. And he saw everybody really as ultimately essential to the success of everyone else. And this is the quote I'll read to you. We are not enemies, but friends. We must not be enemies. Though passions may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic chords of memory will swell again when touched, as surely they will be by the better angels of our nature. And so this practice is one way to just tap into those better angels of our very own nature, is to recognize that we all, in many ways, are friends. So the second thread that I want to just pull out is this idea of a sense of deep connection and our shared similarities. And this one phrase that's very helpful and powerful for me in remembering this is the phrase, just like me. This idea that, everybody, just like me, wants to be friend, like wants to be happy and wants to be free from suffering. And I share that with everybody. And being able to see that helps me recognize my interconnectedness and my similarities. So when I'm going through something difficult, simply considering that the source of my pain and struggle doesn't isolate me from other people, but is actually part of the human experience. And that just like what I'm going through, countless other people have gone through it, even if it's been a different life details that have brought up the experience, the emotions and the physical response to it are familiar to probably almost all people. And whatever I'm going through, whether it's grief or loss or self-doubt, that is part of the human experience. It doesn't isolate me. It's part of the invitation to being human, as I said. And then flipping that the other way, when I see somebody else, even if I don't know them, I know that they've had ups and downs in his or her life. I know that they have goals and dreams. I know they know what pain and sadness, disappointment and grief, anger and fear feel like. I know that this person wants to be loved and to be loved and to love, that they want to be appreciated for what they can contribute, and that they share this basic yearning for meaning in their lives. And on this level, there's no difference between me and any other person in the world. Even if we understand the world in radically different ways, we understand what happiness or freedom from suffering look like in ways that are really different, I can believe that and I can see that about them, and that common humanity becomes a much, much more powerful foundation to have hard conversations about our differences. But this shared aspiration for happiness and freedom from suffering and for flourishing is a common bond that unites us with all other beings. I'm going to read a letter that President Lincoln wrote, and then we're going to do another exercise. And once again, feel free to throw your chat questions in the chat window, because my instinct is to keep saying, any questions? But let me get to this beautiful letter, if I can find it, by President Lincoln. And if I don't find it, then I will share it in the email, the follow-up email. Here we go. So this idea that our sorrow is, and our grief and our struggles, and our challenges and our joys are what connect us to other people, is something that came up over and over and over again in President Lincoln's life. And he used his suffering to really connect with other people. And it was his connection and his ability to see the suffering in others and to recognize that in himself that really ended up shifting in who he was as a president and changing who he was at the beginning of his presidency to his assassination several years later. And I'll read you one quick quote and then a letter, right, that I think illustrates this beautifully. So this is Abraham Lincoln, and I think he's touching on this. He says, "Whenever I hear anyone arguing for slavery, I feel a strong impulse to see it tried on him personally." Right? Like, just like me, that person who's enslaved, just like me, they don't want to be a slave. If you want something for someone else, you would need to be willing to have that be true for yourself. And so whatever you want for yourself is fundamentally, on some level, what the other person, the stranger, the enemy, is what they also want. And being able to see that can be very, very powerful and transformative. But this is a letter that I think really shows President Lincoln's capacity to take his suffering and to let it connect him with others and to let it become a touch point of hope. So there was a young woman named Franny. I think she was 10 years old. Let me see, I've got notes here. Anyway, her dad, William McCulloch, was killed in the Civil War. And she was so devastated that she was inconsolable and she locked herself in her room and wouldn't come out. And so a family friend, David Davis, wrote President Lincoln because President Lincoln knew the McCulloch family well and had stayed with them many times. And so he knew Fanny. And he said, "Would you write her a letter?" And so he did. So this is how the letter goes. It was written from the Executive Mansion on December 23rd, 1862. And it was just a week before he issued the Emancipation Proclamation and 10 days after a disastrous battle of Fredericksburg. So like, it wasn't that he had a lot of time on his hands or nothing else pressing, but he took the time to write this letter to a young girl. "Dear Fanny, it is with deep grief that I learn of the death of your kind and brave father, and especially that it is affecting your young heart beyond what is common in such cases. In this sad world of ours, sorrow comes to all. And to the young, it comes with bitterest agony because it takes them unawares. The older have learned to ever expect it. I am anxious to afford some alleviation of your present distress. Perfect relief is not possible except with time. You cannot now realize that you will ever feel better. Is not this so? And yet it is a mistake. You are sure to be happy again. To know this, which is certainly true, will make you somewhat less miserable now. I have had experience enough to know what I say. At this point, he had lost one son, perhaps two sons at this point. So he had lost his mother at the age of 9. So he knew what it was like to lose a parent. So yes, he had lots of experience. But he said, I have had experience enough to know what I say, and you need only to believe it to feel better at once. The memory of your dear father, instead of an agony, will yet be a sad, sweet feeling in your heart, of a purer and holier sort than you have known before. Please present my kind regards to your afflicted mother, your sincere friend, A. Lincoln. I love these words when he says that, that you probably think that you'll never feel better again. Or he says, you are sure to be happy again. And I think that that's what, in a way, his words are saying to each of us as we are in a moment of incredible distress, or some of the people we love are in incredible distress. To know that we will be happy again comes only from the difficult experiences that we've gone through, and having gotten to the other side, to the place where it's a sad, sweet feeling in our hearts, a purer and holier sort than we have known before. And so we can latch on to that hope for ourselves and offer that hope to others through a practice of common humanity, and recognizing that what we are going through is not unique to us as individuals, as communities, as families, as a nation. And yes, we will share this letter in an email. So saw that in the chat. We haven't done these particulars before, but we've done hard things. And what's gotten us through hard things as individuals, as families, as communities, as a nation, as a world population before will be what get us through again. And by and large, that is compassion and kindness and courage. So what we'll do now for about 10 minutes, do we still have time, Callie, do you think? We're good? Okay. Is I am going to invite you to go into breakout rooms. And the way that this works is you'll just randomly be assigned to one other person on this call at this meeting. And we're going to do an experience that's called an empathic attunement. That's kind of a fancy word. And basically what it means is that each person will have 3 minutes to share something that in this moment is particularly hard. Because COVID-19 has hit all of us. It's true for all of us, but it's also hitting us individually. We each have our own health histories. We have our own personal histories around finances, around, we bring our own stuff. And so it's going to highlight particular things that are individual to us. And so for 3 minutes, or you'll be in a group with one other person in a dyad, and each of you will have 3 minutes. And so at the beginning of the group, just decide who'll go first. And while the other person's sharing, the invitation is to say nothing. You're just listening. You're just hearing what they're saying. No, oh yeah, I know what you mean. No fixing. Literally just being that empathic, imagining you could hold some of President Lincoln's super deep compassion and just hear the person. And when they're finished speaking, you don't need to respond to them. You just say, thank you for sharing. And the person who listens says, thank you for listening. And take a moment, and then the other person will have 3 minutes. And then you'll have about a minute or 2 at the end to sort of share what the experience was of being heard and of listening. And I will send a chat saying at the, when you have 1 minute left at the 3 minute, so at the 2 minute mark, I'll say 1 more minute, switch it up, and then switch it up, and then 1 more minute, then you guys will have 2 minutes to chat. If at any point somebody is like, I didn't sign up for this, just come out of the breakout room and the other person can come out and we'll try to reassign you, or just leave the room when you guys are done if you're done before the time is up. before we do this exercise, I'd like to just read a quote. This is by Frank Ostaszewski, who is a talented, anyway, he's a hospice worker. And I love this advice. So this is coming from his The 5 Invitations. He says, try this sometimes. Sit with another person without a solution to their problem, without playing any role. No analyzing, no fixing, no meddling, no mending. Listen generously, as if the other person has all of the resources they need inside of them. Just respect and receive what is being offered. It's not even important that you understand what they're saying. Imagine your listening presence is more than enough, exactly what is needed. Often, a receptive silence heals more than all the well-meaning words. Okay, so just really setting that intention to hold the receptive silence and just trusting that we're all going to make it through together and that we each have what we need to do this. Go for it. So Joan, I'm going to give you the Star Trek magic.
Well, everybody, we have just a couple folks who are still coming back from their breakout room to join us. If you have come back into the main meeting, please remember to re-mute yourself. And the main presentation will start, once we get everybody back together, we'll continue from there. And it looks like everybody's back, Laura, so you're good to go.
So first, I want to apologize. I didn't realize that my chats were not going to everybody. So thank you to Joan and to whoever, Michelle, for flagging Joan that whoever spoke first was stuck in the twilight zone of the longest 3 minutes of your entire life. I was like, oh. So thank you, Michelle, for letting us know. Thank you for Joan. And thanks to each of you for participating. I hope it was a positive experience and it gave you a taste of just the power of listening and of being heard and of recognizing the humanity of this complete stranger in front of you, but also your own humanity, to hear your own self speak and to feel that you and what you were experiencing in this moment belongs as much as anybody else's, and that it's actually by speaking to that thread that we begin to see the connection that we have to all of life and all of humanity. Anyway, so if you have any thoughts about it, feel free to put them in the chat. But thank you for being willing to take an experiment, to take a ride and to do that. So because of the sort of time burp on my end, not realizing that we, that people weren't being notified on the time, I'm gonna just keep my closing comments to a minimum. I want to read 2 quotes, and maybe 3 quotes, and then just thank you, and then we'll turn it over to some Q&A. And the first quote I want to read is from Tolkien's The Fellowship of the Rings, which is part of the Lord of the Rings series, which have been incredibly important to my family when we were growing up. And this is Frodo. Frodo says when he's got the ring and he's in the middle of this horrible adventure and he never really wanted to leave the Shire. And for those of you who don't know the story, I'm sorry, I'm going to just keep it brief. But he didn't want to leave home, but he had to. This ring came to him, this situation came to him. And he's wishing it hadn't. And he said, I wish it need not have happened in my time, said Frodo. So do I, said Gandalf. And so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us. Nobody woke up in the beginning of 2020 and had on their New Year's resolution list, I will become a compassionate, more loving person because the whole world is going to fall apart. But this is the world we live in. And just like Gandalf said to Frodo, like, we don't get to decide. We're living in these times, and the choice that lies to us is to decide what we will do with that time that is given to us. And along those lines, this is a quote by a poet, David White, from Coleman's Bed that I find tremendous, tremendous strength in. He says, live in this place as you were meant to, and then surprised by your abilities, become the ancestor of it all, the quiet, robust, and blessed saint that your future happiness will always remember. Just like in this moment, we look back to giants of history like Abraham Lincoln and survivors of the Holocaust, and to people who were willing to save people, strangers in difficult times, and do hard, brave things that they never chose. We are invited to live with the most light and love and compassion that we can in this time of darkness. And if we do that, then we have an opportunity to become the giants that people in future generations will look to. And that is the invitation of this moment. And on that note, I want to end with these words from President Lincoln. And this is the end of his second inaugural address. Right still, the Civil War is hot, happening. And he writes, with malice toward none, with charity for all, with a firmness in the right as God gives us to see the right. Let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him and her who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow, her partner, and their orphan, to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations. And so just that's my invitation, that we seek to cultivate our sense of common humanity and to feel malice toward none and charity toward all, and to recognize that that really is the way in which we will heal this moment, heal our nation and the world. And so thank you. Thank you for joining me for this workshop. And it's 3 o'clock now, so if you need to be somewhere else, feel free to jump off. Otherwise, Callie and I will take a couple of questions. Is that okay for a few minutes?
So everybody, you're welcome to type your videos into the chat, and I will do my best to share them with Callie and Laura. I also want to make this announcement, since folks were asking about it. Laura will be sharing the quotes from the program with everybody afterwards, so you can have them for yourself. So the first question that we got in the chat was from Monique, who wants to know, like, what are the ways to start to do that process of looking outwards if you find yourself in a place that is so dark it seems impossible to do that?
So that is a really powerful question, Monique, and it's there are lots of different ways that I could touch on that question, but the one that comes to me in this context is to just recognize that being in that dark place is part of the human experience. To sit with yourself and to, you know, clearly if you feel like you could use support, professional support or support from family and friends in helping you be safe, you get that right away. But to really just be in that space and to recognize that being low and being dark and being overwhelmed is part of being human, and to give yourself permission to be there and to feel that. And often as we do that, we start touching down, it starts softening, and it starts shifting our relationship. We can't always change, we can't change what's happening outside of us. We can't even necessarily change our experience to what's happening. But sometimes we can start by changing the way that we're treating ourselves, or the attitude we have to what the darkness we're feeling, or the darkness that people we love, or the low point that people are feeling. And that's a shift, that sometimes the first piece of suffering that we can touch is just our attitude towards the suffering, and to just recognizing this is really hard. And right now, can't do a lot of outward facing, so I'm going to tend to myself. So that's one. There's also some somatic practices in terms of just paying attention to your breath. What does warmth feel like? Feeling, rather than having an intellectual sort of imagination, just feeling the way that your body breathes for you, putting your hands on your heart and realizing, oh, my heart's still beating. I didn't need to make it beat. So in the end, one of the really important parts of compassion and cultivating compassion is self-compassion, and learning how to be with your own suffering without an agenda. The same way we practice sitting with someone and hearing what their difficulty is without a need to fix it, we can practice that for ourselves. And in fact, there's a really powerful quote by a beautiful woman named Pema Chodron. I'll just read really quickly. She says, "It is unconditional compassion for ourselves that leads naturally to unconditional compassion for others. If we are willing to stand fully in our own shoes, which means really experience what we're experiencing, and never give up on ourselves, then we will be able to put ourselves in the shoes of others and never give up on them. True compassion does not come from wanting to help out those less fortunate than ourselves, but from realizing our kinship with all beings." And I think this is really powerfully illustrated in that letter by President Lincoln to Fanny. It was his own suffering and his own willingness to really be with his own suffering that let him be in a place that he could understand what Fanny was going through. It wasn't from him sort of muscling through his grief. So I hope that's helpful. That's a really short answer to a really big, important question.
Yeah.
What else, Jim?
I'm also seeing a question here from Marissa, who says, any suggestions for how to incorporate these kinds of conversations with our visitors right now? I'm in an institution with a lot of elderly members, including many Holocaust survivors, for whom this is a traumatic reminder of the past.
That is such a great question. So one invitation is to help people remember what got them through. They're alive right now. Like, what got them through that trauma? And to not just remember the trauma, but to remember what resourced them. Was it another person? Was it their like anger? Was it just that they somehow, they don't know how they made it through, but they made it through? But there's some really interesting research and work being done around post-traumatic growth that I think is starting to shift the conversation on trauma, to recognize that human beings, we really are resilient, but not only do we rebound from trauma, but we often become stronger and better and more compassionate because of it. And this isn't to downplay. I can't imagine what people who lived through the Holocaust went through. And so I'm not trying to say that this is an easy answer by any means, but it's a really powerful practice to start recognizing what were my resources that helped me get through that, and how can I extrapolate that or extend that to this new experience. There's another thought I had about it, but also for people who've been through trauma, one of the most powerful ways to heal from trauma is to serve other people who are suffering, using the strengths or the knowledge you got from your experience. And it begins to transform what you went through from being just a trauma to actually becoming one of your superhero powers. And once again, there's some really interesting research, like for example, women who come out of domestic abuse situations and then volunteer at shelters, for them helping other women get to safe places ends up being really powerful and taking something they would never have wanted to go through and they would never wish on their worst enemy, to really becoming, like I said, a superhero power. And then they're like, I wouldn't have given this away for anything, because it's how I show up in the world and make the world a better place. So some of it might be helping people sort of look back and restory, how did I survive? And what did I do afterwards? And I'm going to do this again. I'm going to be okay again. I don't know. So that's my thought right now.
There's also a question here from Allie, who says, sometimes in moments of crisis, especially as things go on, people start shutting down and don't want to reach out to others or don't feel comfortable reaching out. How can you reach out to a friend or family member who might be shutting down while still giving them the space they might be looking for?
Oh, these are such great questions. So I just read a really great article that I'll send a link to in the Chronicle for Higher Education, which was, it's not normal, so stop pretending it's normal. That really, one of the most important process, we're all grieving. We're all in a moment of grief, no matter who you are, even if you are not financially hurt by this, you're not physically in danger, life as you know it is over. We're not going back to what it was a month ago. And there is tremendous grief around that. And so some of it is just that we're all going to respond to this differently, but giving space for that, the normal, that different people are going to process that differently. And so I'll send that article that just sort of says, like, give yourself space to grieve this and to get to a place. And that for most people, when you have gone through that, and grief kind of goes through cycles and ups and downs, and so you'll find some days are easier, some days are harder, and just giving yourself space for that and giving the people you love space for that. But if you notice that someone you care about or you yourself are in a place where you're not sort of doing that natural sort of ebb and flow, then, you know, and possibly having a conversation about looking for for more help from the outside. You know, grief is normal, but complicated grief or grief that's prolonged can sometimes just indicate that somebody needs more support than they personally have, or more resources than they personally have. And that's an act of self-compassion to get yourself the help you need, and it's an act of compassion to help somebody else get the help they need. I think given that we're less than a month into this, we're all just in grief and shock. We're like really early into mourning the fact that our lives are not what they were just a few weeks ago. So I hope that's helpful.
That's what I've got from the chat. The other messages are some lovely, lovely thank yous for you, Laura.
Well, thank you. I'm just so delighted that you guys came. I guess I'll turn the time over to you, Callie, if there's anything else you want to say.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone so much for coming, and just to say how grateful we are that you welcomed us into your own homes and that you shared the last hour or so with us. These are the kinds of conversations that we have every day at President Lincoln's Cottage on tours and in public programs. And I think I can speak for our whole team that maybe this workshop today is just sort of proof that we are missing that right now. We're missing having these conversations with the public, and so we were delighted to be able to offer this today. We have, a series of virtual programs like this one. We have one coming up next week on the importance of emotional intelligence in crisis leadership. That is with someone who works to train federal officials in leadership and things like that. And so he's going to be applying some modern stress leadership strategies to this current situation. So that promises to be a good one. And we also, among other programs, have one tonight that we're offering weekly on Tuesday evenings for families, which is our virtual family game night. And that's just an opportunity. If you cried today, we can promise that you'll laugh tonight if you sign up for that one. So great programs. If you're interested in joining more of these, I encourage you to visit our website at www.lincolncottage.org. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We really appreciate your support. We depend on that, and we appreciate it. And we hope to see you virtually or in person again very soon. So thanks for coming so much.
Thank you for being here.